Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 21 Hats podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Feldman. This week, Sean Bussey, Jennifer Karen, and William Vanderbloemen discuss private equity. Both William and Jennifer have been getting emails and calls from representatives of PE firms who come promising all kinds of gifts: connections, expertise, money to invest in the business, and money to take off the table, which is why the temptation can be great. If anybody even offered me a 3-day vacation, I think I would jump at it, Jennifer jokes. But of course, PE firms do exact a price, possibly including control of what used to be your business. Which is why Jennifer says she wonders whether she should even take the phone calls. Entering those conversations, she says, feels a little like entering the Garden of Eden. Do you take a bite of that apple? Plus, Sean thinks he's found a better way to manage his company's credit cards, and Jennifer gives us an update on her new website. Even in good times, owning and running a business can be a lonely pursuit. Our hope is that these weekly conversations, brought to you by our principal sponsor, The Great Game of Business, will let owners know they are not alone in facing challenges. Same thing with our daily newsletter, the 21 Hats Morning Report, which Inc. magazine named the best newsletter for business owners, and which you can subscribe to for free at 21hats.com, where you can also find transcripts of our podcast episodes and lots of other articles and interviews. Joining me this week on the podcast are regulars Sean Bussey, CEO of Kinesis, which is based in Portland, Oregon, and works with small businesses on marketing, culture, and strategy. Jennifer Karen, who is CEO of SB Expos and Events, an events management business based near Baltimore. And William Vanderbloemen, CEO of Vanderbloemen Search Group, a Houston-based recruiting firm that works with churches and other faith-based organizations. The episode is titled, The Temptation of Private Equity. Welcome, Sean, Jennifer, and William. It's great to have you all here. Jennifer, I gather you've been getting some phone calls from potential investors of late. That must be kind of fun and encouraging, I would think. Tell us about it.
Sure. I started getting some of them during COVID as we switched to virtual conventions and now hybrid conventions on the technology. Suddenly, I think private equity likes tech. Surprise, surprise, right? So as we started to get into this world, I started getting, for the first time ever, emails from private equity. And they've increased in frequency in the past year. So I can't tell if this is born out of they're excited about my company or this is desperation of what's happening in the PE space. So I don't know. It's been interesting. I've talked to two of them and just trying to figure out, do you just ignore the emails? Do you take the time to talk to them?
Tell us about those conversations. What did you learn in talking to the ones you did talk to?
So it was two very different conversations on different ends of the spectrum. The first one I took, it was from a company that's already in our space that's backed by PE, and they were wanting to expand their services. And they reached out to me. I was a newbie. I had no idea what I was asking. So I basically just listened. They talked a lot. And then I asked some questions very rarely. I think I gave up too much information in the beginning when I think about it. Ultimately, my company wasn't at the time, it was just about 9 months ago, the right fit. And then I took another conversation where I started bugging them with questions. Why are you calling me? What's it about my company? Who's backing you? What do they want? And they didn't have any answers. So I was like, goodbye. And I've listened to all of your ups and down podcasts with Jay about ESOP. I love the concept of an ESOP. So I take these private equity calls just to learn about what's out there. I don't know. Every business owner should always supposedly say have an exit plan. I don't have an exit plan. So I'm thinking, maybe I need to think about one.
Did they know anything of substance about your business? Did they have a sense of how big it is or how it's doing, how many employees you have?
The first one did. They knew a lot about it. They had targeted me specifically. The second one did not.
And did it leave you at all tempted?
Sure. I mean, the grass is always greener. If you offer any small business person who works as many hours as I work, like what seems like a lifeline, right? Here's some potential money. It's very tempting and absolutely. And I think what I learned in this, so I need to understand this space better. I completely do not understand. I've learned a lot, I should say, a lot more than I did 9 months ago when the calls first, it started over a year ago, but learned a lot more what even private equity is versus startup capital versus angel investors versus family offices for financing. Those words meant nothing to me last summer. You know what? It's not pretty typical that a company just, or maybe it is, a company just starts up bootstrapping it, right? That's another word I didn't know, bootstrapping.
You did it before you knew what it was?
I did it before I knew what it was. That's exactly it. I'm learning the financial lexicon of this world that is so intriguing, terrifying, and tempting all at once. It's kind of like, I don't know, I'm in the Garden of Eden with the apple, and God's telling me not to eat it.
That's the right metaphor, Jennifer. And of those three words you used, the middle one, terrifying, is the one you should focus on. Because private equity, over and over and over, I have just seen this, they are salespeople. And so I'm curious, before I start condemning them and throwing them under the bus.
No, I think you've started.
I'm curious, what was their sales pitch to you? What did they offer you besides, oh, here's a pile of money? What is their reasoning for approaching you?
The first one was, we are looking to get into this space, and instead of building it, we thought to buy it. The second one was very vague, was, hey, we're in this space and we're looking at companies to acquire, nothing of substance.
Jennifer, did it sound like they were interested in just taking over your business or investing in it and maintaining a role for you?
The first one, I think the investment and a role for me. The second one, I have no idea.
And when you said before that you were a little bit tempted, maybe, would it be for either of those options or just one?
I think the temptation comes from, as I've said in previous podcasts, right now my company is going through a pretty significant transformation and a great one, but it means I'm working ridiculously long hours. So if anybody even just offered me a 3-day vacation, I think I would jump at it, right? But I think when I realize the effort I'm putting in now, I'm going through and I forget the terms, when the caterpillar turns into the butterfly, right? That's what's happening right here in this company. Metamorphosis, is that it, right? But what's been intriguing to me is knowing that I'm sort of peeling back the veil to understand there's a whole world out there of the financial building up or taking down of companies that I didn't really understand, right? I didn't understand any of this world, and now I'm really just getting a feel for it.
Is it that you're intrigued because if you had more capital, you could hire people to take on some of these jobs that you're having to do, and you're working 2, 3, 4, 21 hats roles? Is that what you're thinking, Jennifer?
I think that's part of it. I think there's also an incredible fear that all of my eggs are in this basket. And so to deleverage some of my risk, right?
Did they use the term "take some chips off the table"?
They did. They definitely did.
Wow.
Good job, Sean.
That's amazing.
Total shocker.
I know, right, William?
Yeah.
Hey, we were talking about Garden of Eden, William. I mean, you know all about the snakes.
I do. I feel like they're presenting the apple, right? They're presenting the apple and say, "Don't touch it," and yet the snake's saying, "Take it. It's delicious."
I'm guessing William's gotten some of these phone calls too, and I want to ask him about that. But first, to Jennifer's point, maybe we should define these terms. Let me take a crack at it. Private equity is a pool of money, a fund raised by investors who are looking to either outright buy or invest in businesses. It's different from venture capital in that venture capital is generally looking for startups they can take from, zero to unicorn. Private equity tends to buy existing businesses that have a track record and may continue to run them for a time.
When I think of private equity, I think of an extractive model where the investors are looking to get a return and then run the business for 3 to 7 years and then sell it to usually to another private equity who thinks they can do the same thing.
And they often do it using leverage. They buy a company, they borrow against the assets of the company that they're buying, which often, it puts a lot of debt on that company and can make it very difficult for it to succeed long term. But the investors tend to get their money out. That's one of the horror stories you hear. William, how often do you hear from would-be investors?
Oh, 2 or 3 times a week. Yeah. It's cooled off a little bit. I think for a while, when debt was basically free, I think, private equity was looking for places to park their money besides the market and really went on a buying spree. But having said that, I think, the merger and acquisition pendulum swings back and forth in every industry. And right now in the search industry, it's definitely a hot thing. So I haven't taken any of those calls seriously yet, Lauren. I took enough of them to start to understand what I think the market currently would value us at. I'm not interested in selling, but it seems to me nearly every small business owner thinks their company's worth more than what other people will pay for it.
There's a universal truth.
and I mean, if you started the business, you ought to be its number one fan, right? You ought to think it's just the best thing in the world. But I took enough calls to start to understand options. And I really love our work. I love what we get to do. I've also noticed quite a few friends who've caught some form of lightning in a bottle with their company and think that they'll just go do that again. And it's not quite that easy. So for me, it'd be more of a question of how many options am I leaving open for an exit? And let's stay on radar with PE in case that's the one we want to do. We might do an ESOP. We might just take passive owner income and hire a CEO that's better at this than I am. I do think that you talk about the snake in the garden. It is so funny. The old King James version, like the 1611 that was used forever and ever, when it described the snake, it said, now the serpent was the subtlest of beasts.
Yes. This is good.
So when I think of some of my friends in P&E, they're pretty subtle in the way they state things. I do think I have seen some redeeming value in friends that have used PE and been like, we started this thing, but neither one of us have a business degree. We don't really know what we're doing. And having a professional management team in place actually is good. But I tend to agree with you all. If you go down that road, you can forget ever controlling your company again.
Yeah.
The one thing I liked about these calls, one, I'm naturally curious, and so it's been intriguing to me to see this whole world I don't know anything about. But also, I am very naturally attracted to an ESOP, and I'm trying to temper my natural inclination or enthusiasm with more rational thought. And so by looking more into PE, I can hopefully see the pros and cons of ESOP better, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, but I'm looking at it from a comparison.
Did you, William or Jennifer, in your conversations, did you ever get a handle on, hey, I can sort of see that this industry is valued at X multiple of EBITDA? I know every business broker listening right now is going to be like, but Sean, it's not just a multiple. It's a lot more than that. Whatever. Did you get a sense of that, William?
Yep, I did.
What's kind of the range that you see in there?
Well, so no one's gotten inside our books to take a serious look, right? So wide variance in our industry. And it depends a lot on how you're run. How much of this is personality dependent. If it's a guy who's got a great book of business and he wants to sell, you're looking at 1x gross revenue, maybe 5 or 6 times net. Now, on the other hand, if you get a firm that's fully self-sufficient, that does not depend on personalities, that has a good balance of new business and recurring clients, and it has some digital components with some recurring revenue through software, then you can get up toward 15 on a net.
On EBITDA or net operating income?
EBITDA, yeah. So, there's not a lot of depreciation in search firms. So EBITDA and net are much closer than
a manufacturer would be very, very different.
Yeah. Very, very different. But I think the key is if you're buying a guy, that's not worth near as much as if you're buying a process and a system with some software tools added on. So,
yeah. which has kind of been your journey, right, William? I mean, it seems like you talk about making yourself less relevant every year.
Yep. Yeah, it's far easier than my ego would like.
I bet you've been pretty good on the operate. I bet the marketing side is the hard side for you too.
Well, it's what I love doing.
Yeah,
it's what I love doing. So now, my game for marketing, I'm more like brand ambassador. So I've got a book coming out in November, and since the firm has the same weird name as me, the author, that's sort of kind of halo marketing for the firm without my marketing efforts being viewed as essential to a potential buyer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
And it's a research-based book that tells stories about the common habits we've seen in the very best people we've interviewed now that we've done 30,000 face-to-face interviews. So it's pretty cool, and it will position the company as experienced and a trusted advisor. And so that kind of marketing I'm still involved in. And but the day-to-day stuff, I'm really getting out of the way.
William, in the approaches you've gotten from investors, have they mostly been from investors who are just interested in search in general, or do you hear from people who have figured out that you have a distinctive firm with a very distinctive focus?
Both. Yeah. And I mean, you end up on a list, I'm sure, because it's everything from we help with exit strategies to we're private equity to, hey, we buy search firms and you look appealing. So I just got invited to a thing next month I'm not going to be able to go to, where I think it's put on by 24 PE firms, and they're inviting boutique search firms.
Wow.
I mean, the interesting thing, Jennifer, have you gone down the path of the difference between private equity and an investment bank, for example?
No, I went to one of those sessions, though, that William was talking about, where a law firm put on one of these all-day retreats that you could go and listen to it. And I remember I left it feeling so strange because they invited CEOs of small businesses to come, right? It was like bragging at how great they were and telling us how important they were. And I don't know, it just rubbed me the wrong way. And then when I brought up ESOP, they were like, oh, that's the stupidest idea ever. Don't do it. It costs too much money, right? I didn't really get a lot out of it or learn about it, but I had a speaker at one of our Vistage groups talking about investment banks, but I don't know that much the difference.
I think my shorthand is essentially an investment bank is looking to sell a business, and private equity may be a buyer. So that's another approach you could take, right? You could work with a firm that positions you for sale, and then they play the different capital groups against each other. That's the ideal situation. If you want to sell and you want somebody to help you navigate that process, that's the investment bank route. And they collect a fee and that whole thing, but there's advantages and disadvantages. But they're all going to tell you ESOP is terrible because they can't make a commission on it, right? Like that's...
Or not as big a one.
Yeah, or not as big a one. Yeah.
I met an entrepreneur who he sold his third company, his private equity firm, as what do they call it? The bolt-on, right? And I asked him, I said, they say that saying of every business owner is like a boat owner. You should figure out how you're going to exit, right? When you're going to sell your boat the first day you buy it, and vice versa. When you start your company, I was like, did you really, is that true? He's like, absolutely. I absolutely think of an exit plan. And I was like, oh. And he said, did you? I was like, it's never occurred to me that I could exit. I felt somewhat. So I want to learn and understand this world.
But Jennifer, I think you must know that you are not alone in this. I think it's probably, Sean, you would probably know best. It's unusual for a business that's still kind of in the growing stage to already be thinking about exits.
I mean, what is really interesting to me, because I think last time we were on together, Jennifer, you shared you were just below 5 million, but over 2, somewhere in that, so, and thanks for sharing that. Because what's interesting is that they're being aggressive with you, and to be aggressive with a company at your size tells me they're very bullish on the industry or the solution, because usually PE doesn't want to talk to you until you've hit 5 million. Or have $1 million in earnings in EBITDA. And so I think what's going on here is you're in a hot market, or you've created something that's hot. And I think you want to really keep that in perspective as you go forward, that there's a reason they're talking to you and you have the value. And they're going to portray it as like, oh, we can help you and blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, I think you've got the leverage here.
That is great insight. Thanks, John. I had not thought about that at all. And that is, to go back to William's, they're being subtle with me, huh?
Uh-huh. Well, they are the subtlest of creatures. And the other thing too, Jennifer, is, and William brought this up, the capital markets have radically changed. So money is not cheap/free anymore. So I suspect that the PE folks are starting to look at businesses that have good net operating income. And a well-run professional services business should have really good net operating income. And what they probably see with you through their lens is like, services, people are moving back into real life events. This is an upward. Zoom is going to go down, events are going to go up. And they probably see it as an opportunity to squeeze margin out of your business by optimizing it. So if you say, let's say you have 10% net operating income or 15%, they're going to want to drive that to 20, 25%. And how they do that is the painful part. So that's the thing. I suspect they're moving towards margin and away from speculation because the capital markets have become so difficult for them. And I've read articles that say basically the private equity model breaks in a high interest environment. And that'll be interesting to see over the coming years.
I should point out, I've talked to business owners who sold to private equity and were very happy with the way it turned out. It does happen.
Same here, Lauren. Same here.
Based on my entirely unscientific anecdotal survey, those companies seem to be in the minority, and that's certainly what you tend to read about. But every fund is different and has different characteristics and interests and focus. And I think sometimes the stars do align. It is possible. I know one company, it's technically a private equity business, but their name is Permanent Equity, and their strategy is to buy and hold and to keep the owner involved as long as the owner wants to be. And they've done that with all their investments. They don't make that many. They really just focus on bringing in not professional management to take over, but professional help to supplement what the owner has been doing. So there are other flavors out there.
I'm curious, Lauren, I when I first heard about the permanent equity idea, I was like, actually, that could work. But that was before interest rates went up. And, I'm curious if that's changed.
That's a great question. I have not spoken to anybody there since interest rates went up, so I don't know the answer. One thing I do know about them is that, unlike some places, they don't feel compelled to invest if they don't have an investment that they find attractive available. So they'll go, more than a year without investing in a business if that's what they think is the right thing to do. And maybe, as they say, they're keeping their powder dry right now.
Well, they are the subtlest of creatures. So, I mean, that's a classic sales strategy. I hate to say it, but like saying, well, we're really busy and we might be able to take you on. I mean, sorry for the cynicism, but I think, you could build a model that's, there are certain industries, for example, where the margins are sufficient to service the debt from an outside investor. The problem is a lot of owner-run businesses just don't have the margin to support that type of outside investment. And so when the investment comes in, they've got to find the money somewhere. And usually that means cranking down on costs in the business. And that's where then the culture suffers, the employees leave. Yeah, so the owner might be happy.
Not to be poo-poo, but I haven't learned quite a bit and still learning about culture. I think if the private equity does well and they grow at a, triple in 5 years kind of rate, the culture is going to suffer because culture does not withstand fast growth.
Yeah, that's a good point, William.
That's kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Right.
I think that's right.
So the interesting thing about Jennifer's situation, she told us that she was a little bit tempted because She, as she's described here in previous episodes, is in what Sean called the Valley of Death. She's at this stage where she personally is working really hard. The business is growing, it's doing well, but she doesn't quite have all the people in place that allow her to, grow comfortably and live a normal life. William, I'm curious, did you ever go through a stage like that? And were you approached by investors at that point?
Yes, we went through that stage. It was probably 8 years ago. 8 years ago. Yeah, we had really big hockey stick growth and then had a great PR firm that helped us get our first book out and got a couple of big placements. The Chicago Tribune wrote a thing about the rise of pastoral search firms. And so those calls came, and it was an easy decision because, I got a bunch of young kids at home. This was not going to be life altering money, if that makes sense. I was going to have to go find something else to do after some time off, and I didn't know what that'd be. I'm was convinced and still am that we haven't even really scratched the surface of our market. So I turned it down pretty quick. And, then our growth has, as Lauren knows, has been intentionally at the speed of cash and not ever intended to be sort of hockey sticks. So we've had nice growth, but not anything that has put us at a new place of saying, now it's time to take those calls.
Do you think you got out of that stage where you were working too hard and stretched too thin just by keeping at it?
No. I think we did, for good or bad, restrain some growth by beginning 8 years ago, me taking a little less ownership over the day-to-day decision, taking a little more time in the summers, getting me out of doing searches. We need to get William out of searches. He can't be doing the searches. We got to save him for other things. So our young sales guy is talking to this church and say, well, this is the fee. And, William involved? No, William's not involved. If you wanted William involved, it'd cost you another $25,000. And they're like, well, we definitely want that then, because that's got to be cool. So it's total backfire. We tried it for like a year, and I ended up with more searches than ever.
Well, you are the subtlest of search firms.
So we did turn the spigot off a little bit on what can we squeeze out of William being involved in the name of a more peaceful long-term venture. I don't know that I'm building a 100-year company, Lauren, but the tugboat idea, like, let's make this sustainable. Let's be a small giant. That kind of came on radar. Let's get serious about a growth that can live past me. And that has taken a long time, and not without some ups and downs, culture going sideways, having to get reined back in. I mean, it's not been a, totally up into the right journey, but I like the decisions we've made so far.
Jennifer, does that sound like a viable approach for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think right now, this hockey stick growth that we're in, to use his analogy, is because of what happened post-COVID and this entire new market of hybrid conventions. And I almost feel like I'm in the perfect storm of opportunity that if I don't take advantage of this now, like, it's just the perfect time to me jump on it. I can't sustain this pace of me personally working in this growth forever. And I feel close. Like, a lot of things have happened recently. New hires, let some people go. I have a fractional CFO that realized the strain I'm under and who said to me, Jen, you know what? I'm taking a more active role because you just can't do all of it. And she got involved, and she's been making decisions and brought people in right and left. So I feel like the pieces are finally, I feel the edge of the desert. Let me put it that way, right? I feel the edge of it. So to what William's saying is, yeah, I like the tugboat idea. I like it. I also, like I said, love ESOP. It's just tempting because I'm working every weekend, but we're getting through it.
Jennifer, can you charge your clients $25,000 more if Jennifer is involved?
Yeah.
I remember those days. We were in line at Space Mountain in Disney, and a sales call came through, and I had our youngest on my hip and my phone in my ear, and Adrian said, what are you doing taking a call right now? And I said, well, how do you think we got to Space Mountain? Oh, it's just, it'll pass. I promise it'll pass if you plan for the long haul.
Yeah.
Did you really know it was going to pass at that stage, William?
No, really don't want to think about how much money I left on the table by not being on the road all the time. But I think that I'm happy with where we are.
Jennifer, I love hearing what you said about your CFO. Do you have anybody else in your organization that acts as that lieutenant for you? That like, gosh, they know what I need to do next and they're helping me do it before I ask them to do it.
Yeah, I have a person that I hired. I've known her for 20 years. She came in a different role, and in the last 9 months has realized, okay, Jen, and I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I'm the visionary. And so I gave her that book, Rocket Fuel.
Mm-hmm.
And
Great
she's
book.
like, yes.
Fantastic book. Everyone listening should read that book. It'll take you one day.
Yes, totally agree. And so she's like, okay, I get it. I'm the integrator. You're not the detail-oriented integrator. You see the future of what's happening with hybrid conventions. You're the speaker. You're the person who understands how to combine this new technology with the services. I'm going to help be the integrator. Because to be honest, I don't need business development. I have slowed down growth. We get so many RFPs, so many calls. I don't need more growth. And so, yes, to your question, she's been instrumental. And the CFO jumping in, and I have some other people that I've hired that are now, they're stepping up to that role. We had a senior leadership retreat 2 weeks ago, and they all said to me, I think, William, what probably your staff said to you years ago, they said, Jen, you need to get out of this decision making and do the stuff that you're good at, and we need to get you out. So we're on our way.
This is going to be my prediction. In a year, your life is going to be dramatically different. I think you've got it. You'll get there.
Thank you. Well, Sean, my 30th wedding anniversary is next year. I was a child bride.
So you're 42.
Yeah, right. Convincing my husband, we're going to go for a 2-week trip to Europe. My husband's from Poland, and so we're going to travel around the south part of Europe. He's never seen Italy or Spain. So I'm hoping that I don't have to look at email except to run payroll. So we'll see. Talk to me next July after my anniversary.
Make that part of your one-page plan and let your team know that that's what you want to do. Let them know that's your vision.
All right, I want to hit a couple of other points in the limited time we have left. Sean, you've recently decided to change banks. Can you tell us what prompted that?
Honestly, the pandemic and the PPP experience was really one of the first dominoes, right? I learned really quickly how grateful I was because I had 2 banks at that time. I had a local community bank, shout out to Beneficial State Bank, which is a B Corp bank, really, really great organization.
What did you use them for?
They helped me with the PPP. So I was in the middle of transitioning my accounts to them when the pandemic hit. So I still had Bank of America as my primary bank, and I'd had them forever. And the difference in experience of getting PPP funds from Bank of America versus Beneficial was dramatic because I applied to both organizations at the same time. And Beneficial came through, and Bank of America, like a year later, was like, well, we're ready to help you with your PPP. And I was like, sorry. So, community banking, was, obviously a big deal for me. And you've heard Jay talk about this a lot, on the show, as well as others, that having a relationship with your banker is really important, especially when you don't need them, because what I find is that they really want to be your friend when you don't need them. So build the friendship then, not when you're desperate. And then the other thing that happened is I learned that because I have our credit cards still through Bank of America, I learned just how little control you have with a credit card and how vendors can charge to it once they have access to it. And I was really shocked. I had a vendor who threw a $5,000 charge on the card pretty much fraudulently, but the effort it took to unwind that was...
This is a subscription type business, right?
Yeah. I had a subscription. It was $200 a month, and I canceled the subscription, and they said, well, now you owe us for 3 years, per your contract, which actually I hadn't signed the actual contract that they were citing. But then I was stuck in the bureaucracy because it's all automated, right? So it was tons of time and hours on the phone with Bank of America. I finally got it reversed, but it took a better part of 2 months, 3 months, and a lot of my time. So yeah, it just was a real eye opener to the credit card world and the banks that run them and the control or lack of control that you might have.
So what are you doing for credit cards now?
Yeah, I found a fintech company. This was assisted through kind of the LinkedIn network that I have. So I kind of put the situation out there on LinkedIn. I was like, there's got to be a better way. And I sort of proposed, hey, wouldn't it be cool if there were like a virtual credit card company? And somebody said, well, there actually is, Sean. And it's called Divvy. And what it does is it allows you to spin up virtual cards with all kinds of controls on them. So you can say, hey, I want this card to have a $200 monthly limit because I'm going to use it with this vendor that I'm not sure about and doesn't have a proven track record. And then you can assign a cancellation date. You can say, hey, this card is going to expire in 6 months. You can assign the card to employees in the company. It's really powerful. And now the downside is there's no points. There's no lines of credit. You have to pay it off every month, but it gives me like absolute control over where my money goes, which is fantastic.
Sean, do you pay everything or did you on your credit card or did you have sort of ACH, direct deposit, whatever set up?
A kind of a mix. So the bigger stuff and the stuff where we have a high trust relationship, we would do ACH, but there's just a lot of subscriptions that we use, technology. I'm sure it's the same for you, right, Jennifer?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
like tons of technology. And, it's $30 a month, $50 a month. And the problem with everything going to subscription is that, these companies, they can change things willy-nilly. Speaking of private equity, I had a great software vendor, wonderful. It was kind of expensive. It was $600 a month, but it was fantastic. They were bought by some sort of private equity company. They jacked up the rates to $900 a month. And they're like, oh, yeah, we can do that per our agreement. And, it was like, wow. But, we weren't paying attention, right? That's what they kind of lean on, is that you're not really focused, because it's like it's a proven vendor. You've paid them over and over. So your bookkeeper may or may not flag it as he or she is processing your books. So I think there's a bit of a predatory environment out there with the ability to have subscription. And I think some companies kind of count on that you aren't looking very closely. So I've just taken a lot more control recently, and it feels good to be back in control.
Do you miss those points?
I don't. I don't. To be honest with you, I think it's tripping over dollars to save dimes oftentimes. It just doesn't motivate me.
Jay Goltz would argue with that. I think Jay is prouder of the money he gets back from his credit cards than he is of the business that he built.
But see, Jay's at a different point, right? Like Jay's got a much larger organization, so the money he gets back is meaningful. When you're, in that $1 to $5 million range, yeah, okay, maybe get a free plane flight once a year or something. My time, just to Jennifer, to your point, my time is way more valuable than that free flight. And so I'm looking for ways to basically scale up my efficiency, not to get, $50 here or $100 there. I'm curious, Jennifer, how do you work?
Well, it's been all American Express.
Okay.
And same thing, Sean, we have a lot of subscriptions. And so also my CFO is like, look, you got to change the way you pay for some of this stuff because it was either actual checks. Like I was actually writing a year ago, manual checks.
Oh, wow.
It was crazy. So we switched to Bill.com.
We use that too.
Okay. Bill.com. It's been great. But Amex, so a couple people have recommended Divvy to me. It's interesting you said that. They're like, Jen, I think you need to switch to Divvy. And so I've been looking into it to get out of just the reliance, to your point, on these credit cards that are on everything, right? My Amex is on everything. And yeah, same thing happened to me with Salesforce.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wait, why am I paying so much more money for my license? Oh, okay.
Yeah. And the other thing too, I'm glad you mentioned Bill.com. I think that's a really good tool. And we use it a lot, especially for higher ticket items that are non-recurring. The other thing I think about too, and this is a personal experience, somebody stole my credit card number through a website. I don't know how they got it, but we put our credit cards on so many websites. You're just never going to know, which website was compromised. But as soon as they have that number, the first thing they do is they start jacking up illicit spend, right? And then you're kind of in this awful situation where you've got your card at like 25 different companies and you've got to reset it. And just that like time it takes. And then you got to go to the credit card company and dispute the fraudulent charges. And then that's a process. And
Do you think that's going to be easier with Divvy if it happens?
oh, for sure. Because basically I've just created cards for different vendors. And
I
so
see.
if that one card is compromised, no big deal.
Well, in our issue, we have people travel nonstop.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And we
Yeah.
submit travel expenses. And so we've just finished this very complicated but syncing between QuickBooks, Bill.com, and Expensify.
Oh, cool.
It's fantastic. It's going to save us a lot of time, but I don't want to do Divvy just because I'm like, I just finished
just did
this.
it. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, and we have, like, I have limits on everybody's American Express. And then if they get close to the limit, I get an alert on my phone that so-and-so is getting close to their limit.
We're almost out of time. Jennifer, you've talked to us about working on your website. Can you give us a quick update on where you stand with that?
I'm so excited. Phase 1 of our new website's up. Please, everybody, take a look. DiscoverSB.com. We have a brand new website, and we are moving towards phase 2, which will have videos and case studies and more testimonials. We've been doing a lot of taking B-roll footage at our convention. So super excited. By the first of the year, we'll have phase 2, but phase 1 looks 1,000 times better, and I love it.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
What did you learn in the process?
ChatGPT can be really good at writing marketing copy.
Interesting.
Oh, man. You realize you're talking to an editor here.
But second, it is really hard to find the right photographs to encapsulate what you do. You know, they always say an image is worth 1,000 words. That takes a lot of time to find the right perfect image on your website. And we have good, not great images. So that's part of phase 2 is really trying to get great photography and great video. So that's probably the second thing I learned. And that having a professional do your website is worth the money.
Amen. Says the professional.
I think I tried to do it too cheap for too long, and it was silly. It's really silly. You should hire a professional. They'll make it look great. They taught us how to do some basic text edit changes in WordPress, so great, but I should have done this a long time ago.
What did you learn about using ChatGPT for marketing copy?
I tend to write very business-oriented. The staff that I had wrote very business-oriented. We put them in and asked it to refresh for like a subhead or a heading, and worked it through where they came up with some, ChatGPT came up with some cool headers that I wouldn't have had.
William, didn't you tell us that you put the information about your coming book into ChatGPT and got a headline out of it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I use it for, I do a lot of writing, whether it's Forbes or whatever, but I use it for titles all the time. I think the title is half the post if you're trying to get people to read. And I don't know, I'm not very good at titling or they're very good at it or both.
Do we call it they? Or is it it? Is it she or he? What is ChatGPT?
This is a good question.
It's an it. Let's please not turn it into a human.
William, what have you figured out in terms of getting those titles from it? How do you prompt it?
I usually put my existing title in and say, retitle this. Now, I have found that the content that they produce, like copy for things, is not reliable.
I agree. I think what I found is that I could write the paragraphs of copy, but I couldn't think creatively enough on the headers, the titles. And they helped me. Like one of them is like unleash the magic of outsourced meeting logistics. And I was like, I would have never come up with that, right? Never in a million. Now, Sean, a company like yours, your people, you're more creative, but our website designer wasn't a copywriter, right? They helped me, some of it, they helped me organize stuff, but I think that was pretty cool what ChatGPT could do.
Well, and you put your finger on something I've seen for a long time with real humans is that there are headline writers and there are body copywriters, and each can do the other to some degree. Like I'm a headline guy. I can write headlines all day long. It takes me a long time to write full copy. I can do it, but I'm not that efficient at it.
All right, I suspect Jennifer and William, and maybe Sean too, have to check and see if they've gotten any offers for their company while we've been talking here. My thanks to Sean Bussey, Jennifer Karen, and William Vanderbloemen, and to our sponsor, The Great Game of Business, which helps businesses use an open book management system to build healthier companies. You can learn more at greatgame.com. Thanks, everybody. Wait, don't leave yet. If you have a question or a comment that you'd like the 21 Hats owners to address, send it to me by replying to your morning report or by email at lauren@21hats.com. That's LOREN @21hats.com. Do it now before you forget. And don't be afraid to tell Jay what you really think. He can take it. And if you got something out of this conversation, help us reach more business owners. Tell a friend. Subscribe and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Twitter. Subscribe to the Morning Report at 21hats.com. This episode was produced by Jess Thuberon, founder of Blank Word Productions. Okay, now you can leave. Thanks for listening, everyone.